welcome to a very first Utah County Republican Party podcast. I'm here with Cristy. Cristy, do you want to say hello?
Hello. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I think we should probably just keep it low key. I know we've talked about different ideas, but just conversational. If we have other people, keep it conversational. We're going to go into a couple of things real quick, and I'm just going to kind of give people an outline so they know where we're headed with this, and then they can follow along. The format may change. My experience, so I've been podcasting for like 17 years, and so I have a lot of experience, and usually a podcast takes a few months to find its voice. So I'm just going to warn everybody here, right? We may switch things up as time goes on. But for today, we're basically going to talk about some of the announcements, things we have coming up from the party. We're going to talk about the idea we have for where this podcast can go and what we kind of envision for it. That probably dovetails a little bit with our vision for the party. And so we'll see how that all lines up. And then we're going to get into just helping people get to know who we are a little bit and talk about how we got into politics. So, Cristy, what do we have coming up? What are the big deals?
Oh, man. We have a lot coming up. If you're on executive committee, our last meeting, a little overwhelming and super exciting. So I'm pretty excited about most of the stuff coming up. We've got a really, really heavy spring. And so our hope is that we can kind of get everybody prepped for this stuff and get them excited. It's a lot of stuff though. So let me give you a couple of the highlights that we have coming up. As soon as Christmas break is over, January 13th, if you're on the Central Committee meeting, we will be meeting. And so look for information about that. We should have a mailer coming out and some emails coming your way. And so January 13th, we are, believe, in the northern part of the county now, and our hope and our goal is to try and go northern, central, south. And so if you remember last Central Committee in November, we were down in Spanish Fork, which some people were super excited about.
It was pretty funny.
We took a look at the numbers.
Yeah,
and definitely the geographic location makes a difference. The south part of the valley showed up. So that was cool. So we will be in Lehigh this time, I think at Vista Junior High. And so we'll get the information out for that.
And just to clarify, that's precinct chairs, precinct vice chairs, and then anybody who's involved in the House district leadership.
Yep. And elected officials. And we have big goals with those numbers. They've been going up, which is great. And they're quarterly. And so our hope is that if you ran for that office, you'll join us with these meetings. We try and make them entertaining, but also relevant. Like they're packed with information. So. Okay, after that, we have got, before that, the 2nd through the 8th, I believe, is filing. So if you have any interest in filing and there is a position that is going to be open, most of these are like with the legislature. Filing is open with the state from the 2nd through the 8th. And
I'm going to chime in on that one too. So, a couple of years ago, I ran for school board. So it's everybody. It's school board. It's, legislature. It's, any position anywhere you need to file. Then if you have any questions about how to do it, let us know. Because honestly, I love seeing people come in and try and make a difference. And so, by all means, contact me, contact Cristy, and we'll help you figure it out. The people of the county are great too.
Absolutely. And if that's an appeal, which I think you and I both like, why people get into why they decide to serve or be active or get into politics. Sometimes you just really feel like you're supposed to. And so if that's the case and you need help filing, don't let the obstacles of, the paperwork get in the way of feeling like you're supposed to do something.
Yeah. The paperwork's not that bad either. So
it's not horrible. I was surprised. I didn't understand that there was that the different positions have a different filing fee, like almost like kind of significantly. So there's that. Okay, then we have the session begins. And so that is coming up. The legislative session begins on March 1st and then March 5th. Sorry.
The legislative session ends March 1st, doesn't it?
Sorry, it starts on January 16th and ends.
There you go.
Yeah. And ends. I've got this mixed up where I'm just reading. No, I'm just 45 and I'm reading the lines wrong. And then caucus is, oh my gosh, caucus. Caucus is the most exciting thing that is in our ballpark and the most terrifying thing. And
Yeah.
so we have got awesome house leaders. Our house chairs have been frantically trying to secure locations with their precinct chairs. And so caucus, March 5th, caucus. Um, it is the greatest system that we have. It comes to your neighborhood, and you get to elect people that hopefully you know and understand, and have similar values. And so I can't stress caucus enough. And I think we're going to talk about caucus a little bit later too.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then we had a little bit of a switch. Our hope was that we would do Lincoln Day dinner after all of this craziness, but for a lot of good reasons. We are going to have Lincoln Day dinner on March 16th. That's a Saturday, and I believe we have UVU reserved.
Hmm.
And so we're going to have details coming out about that. Um, Excited. We're gonna throw it in the mix, but in the middle of all this, we're gonna throw a big event, a fundraiser, but also kind of a get together. And we've got some really fun stuff. We'll do a future podcast about Lincoln Day dinner
Yeah,
and what we have for that.
it's gonna be
Oh,
awesome.
it is going to be awesome, and we're going to use people and their talents that are among us, and I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, and then our county convention is April 20th. And so that's a Saturday. It's going to begin at 9 a.m. And then the state convention is April 27th. So it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yep.
So hopefully we'll post this up on the website too, so people can take a look at it and save the date for us.
Yep, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, if it's an election year, and that's kind of where we're at with a lot of this stuff. So, yeah, we really look forward to interacting with all of you and helping you get involved as much as possible, so that you know who the people are who are running, and so that you can make the best decision possible for whoever represents you. So, that's kind of where a lot of this leads, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that you know where you're at and you know what you're dealing with, as far as how the system works and when to show up, as well as how to know which people are the right people to elect. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think our goal is to create a system that works the best, so that people who ever get involved, they can plug right into the system, and that the stuff is we've
hmm
communicated it effectively. They know where to be, when to be, because the most important thing we need them to be able to do is to vet these candidates and
right.
participate in that, and to represent their community as best that they can. And so yeah, our goal is to get a system that is as smooth as possible. So we're going to do everything we can to
Yep.
do that.
Yep, absolutely. And just kind of coming back to it, I mean, this is what I love about it, is that the people from my neighborhood get to be part of the process of choosing the people who run or who go to the primary in the general election, rather than just, whoever puts the best ads on TV. So,
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, exciting stuff. Let's talk about the podcast a little bit. So, I know we have, different ideas about where we want this to go, but what's your idea as far as where you'd like to see the podcast go?
Okay, I think we're actually a pretty good matchup here, Chuck, because you have experience with podcasting, and my family and friends know. I literally just had a t-shirt on last night that said like podcast rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And so I am a connoisseur, a huge fan of just the reach that podcasts and the variety of subjects that you can talk about. And then when I found out that this is your expertise, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So, as far as being relevant and moving to where we can communicate with people on their terms,
hmm
podcasting is where it's at for us. So,
Yep.
as far as the structure and the format, we have. So I think some pretty great ideas, but our goal is to, and I think from the beginning is, we don't want to shy away from having difficult conversations
Right.
civilly. And so the political field and the realm of being able to have controversial issues discussed, I think podcasting is the best place for it. So our hope is to be able to include, relevant subjects, whether it's between leadership or hopefully as many elected officials as we can have on. Also, house chairs, precinct chairs. If there's a spotlight type thing that needs to happen, or there's information that people have that we need to get out, that would be great. And then subjects. what's affecting Utah County, what's
Right.
affecting Utah, but specifically Utah County. And, how can we, like I said, use this system to magnify our concerns here and get the information out to the people. So I think podcasting's near and dear to my heart. And so
Yeah.
I'm excited about this.
Mine too. I love podcasting. I just want to add on to what you're saying. I mean, effectively, the things that I hear people complain about are, I don't know how to get involved, or I
Mhm.
don't know what I'm supposed to do, or I don't have time to keep up on everything, or I don't know what's important to look at, or all of those kinds of things. I don't hear as much from the party, right?
Right.
And the other issue that I see is that it seems like everybody else out there, right, whether they're some of these independent groups, or whether it's the other major party that's out there, or the news media, they all want to tell people who we are. And to be perfectly honest, I've met a lot of different people that don't fit any of the narrative that's out there. And so for me, it's also a way for us to say, hey, look, no, this is who we actually are. Like, hear it from us, right? And then, yeah, if you have a hard question, if you've got, your doubts or concerns or anything else, then by all means bring them to us. But that's a major portion of what I'm looking for here, is just, it's like, look, we're in leadership in the party, where we have an idea of where we want it to go. We want you to be on board and know what we're doing and who we are and what we're about. And we want to do that for other people within the party, whether they're in party leadership, or whether just kind of your run of the mill I vote Republican, or whether they're legislators, or whether they're running for the statewide office, right? And so all of these things kind of come together for, okay, how do we look to these things and pay attention? And then I was having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, and I don't even know what his party affiliation is. He seems to generally agree with me on a lot of issues, so I'm assuming he votes Republican at least some of the time. But we were talking about the idea of what the parties are and what they stand for. And he kept bringing up issues in the federal realm of things, right? So he'd bring up, well, Congress did this and Congress did that, and the Republicans in Congress did this, and the Democrats in Congress did that. And I talked to him and I said, I hate to say it, but at the federal level, we have a whole lot less control as voters, right? Because they represent a much larger area, and a much larger group of people. And the other thing is that they go all the way over there. I mean, from Utah, they go more than halfway across the country in order to get over there, and they spend a ton of time there. And so it's a lot harder for us to make things happen at that level. And some of the things they do, they definitely affect us. We're dealing with inflation and unemployment and a whole bunch of other things right now, that kind of cram down from the federal level. But then you start looking at what's going on around us, right? And into, hey, the county, they're, are they going to raise taxes? In what way does that affect us? Does the school board, right? Alpine School District raised taxes 18% last year. And I don't think most people know. They're going to get that thing in the mail and they're going to be, what is this, right? And it's going to be frustrating, right? And so just to help people understand, hey, look, we've got these local issues, we've got water issues, we've got something that we keep talking about with public-private partnerships, right? And helping people understand those issues, right? Those generally aren't getting crammed down from the federal government. Those are things that we're doing to ourselves at the state level. And the thing that I really like about the conversations we can have here is that my rep, Corey Malloy, lives in the same city I do, right? I could be at his house in 5 minutes. Heidi Baldery's my senator, right? And she lives 10 minutes away the other way, right? And so if I want to go find these people, I can pick up the phone and I can call them, and they're going to pay attention to me, right? They may not always do what I want them to, but at least I have that reach, right? I can show up to the school board meeting and I can tell them what I think, right? I can't do that at the federal level, right? And so I talk to people as well that say, I don't want to be a Republican anymore because the Republicans, blah, 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 blah. And the narrative is coming out of these national news sources that, yeah, they do some stuff that's frustrating to me too. But the reality is that I want to be here for those local things and help people understand, hey, look, this is where you can make a difference, right? This is where you can go and have an impact. And Ken Ivory summed it up really well in the event that we had last week, where he effectively said a lot of these legislators, you know, who was it? Was it the governor's office that said we were getting inundated, and inundated was like 13 phone
Yeah.
calls or something, right? And so that's the issue, right? It's like, look, these are the things that we're looking at locally. These are the things we care about. This is what the party platform says about it. And here's how you get a hold of your person. And if we inundate them with, I don't know, 20 calls or 30 calls, then maybe we can swing the pendulum one way or the other and make sure that what's happening is what the voters and the people want, right? I'm not here to tell anybody, that they're right or wrong about a particular issue. I'm also not going to shy back from sharing my opinion. But at the end of the day, it's those kinds of things where it's like, look, they're talking about this, and here's the good that we think we could come from it, but here are the red flags that we're also seeing. And so, people can start having the conversation on their own in areas where they can actually make an impact, right? Because that's what we're here for. If we can't make
Yeah.
an impact, why are we even here?
Yeah. Wow. You touched on tons of stuff that's like super near and dear to me. Number one, I say the same thing. My parents, bless their hearts, watch CNN all day long and then complain about federal issues. And I have one
Right.
response to them every time. You are both retired. You have some
Mm-hmm.
financial comfort. So why don't you get involved where it really matters? And so I always
Yep.
tell them, hey, come help us. Let's get involved on the state and the county and the city level, wherever you want. I can help you. But no, a lot of people don't want to. So for me, you hit the nail on the head, is that the stuff that impacts us, that is closest to us, that is in our,
Yep.
domain of control. Those are the things. And so for vision with this podcast, one of the biggest things that I want is that people often will be upset about something, but they can't put language to it, or they
Mm-hmm.
don't know exactly where it comes from. And so I have this saying, that one of my goals is to let people know from whence their pain comes. And
Right.
so when you have things that are happening, but you don't know exactly, like, where did this come from? Politically, can we find it? Can we find the code? can
Mm-hmm.
can we find exactly what it is? And in regard to having conversations with your elected officials, and you may have disagreements, which is fine too, but if we
Yep.
can find the point of disagreement and we can put language to it, like, that's part of, what I envision for this podcast, is to say, okay, well,
Yep.
what are the things affecting us? Where did it come from? And if we disagree, that's fine, but let's find the point at which we disagree, instead of just feeling like there's so much going on and there's so much
Mm-hmm.
wrong and we don't know, and so we throw our hands in the air and then we just say, I don't care, I hate politics. And
Right.
so for me, and I say this to my best friend all the time, because she's not a fan of politics, and I said, it doesn't, everything's politics. Like,
Yep.
and if you don't care about politics, it comes for you. And so, Hannah Arendt, she's one of my favorite philosophers. She had this disagreement when she studied Plato, and Plato essentially goes off into the woods, and he decides that the best place for a philosopher after the whole debacle with Socrates is that he's going to go into the woods, and then he is just going to contemplate, and bring out the truths and give them to society. And Hannah Arendt, as a Jew after World War II, comes to America and narrowly escapes, and she has this realization that the greatest place for a philosopher is in politics. It's in the political
Mm-hmm.
sphere, because it is the point at which ideas affect the most people.
Right.
And so forever I have thought, I don't have the personality type per se. I don't love, all the things that come with politics. I don't know how you are, but it's not my cup of tea. I would love to, I don't know if you can see my books behind me, but I would happily spend the majority of my life listening to podcasts and reading books.
Yep.
Hannah Arendt changed my mind about this when she said that those are the people that need to get involved in the political sphere. And I'm in no way saying that I have all the answers, but I think I have more questions than answers. And so
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes that can help people, come to at least the point that we know what is affecting us in our communities. And then let's have those discussions around that,
Right.
and not shy away from this. I hate politics because the the national narrative is this divide, and there's pejorative language
Right.
constantly. And so part of this podcast for me is that we get to define what a Republican is, and we get to
Yep.
define what a Utah County Republican is,
Hmm.
and stop having these labels put on us of what we think and who we are. And then lastly, I just want to say I've been doing a lot of interviewing of youth. So I had a BYU student reach out to me. She's near graduating, and she said, the professor that she's working with wanted to know if we felt like democracies were dying, so then I had this conversation. Well, Republicans like to do this, but we're not a democracy,
Right.
okay, under the
Yeah.
umbrella, right? And so we had this conversation, and at the end I said, hold on, do you care if I ask you some questions? Like, you interviewed me, but I'd like to interview you. And I said, what is the obstacle of, it seems like the youth are having a difficult time wanting to align with Republicans. Like, they don't want to say it, it's not cool. And I said, what's the problem? And she said, well, the problem is this: we have these social issues, and we have friends with these social issues,
Hmm.
and I want people to know that I have a heart.
Yep.
And so, but I also want to pay my bills on time. And so she said, I have this contrast between having a heart and being responsible. And I thought, oh man, we have not communicated. They think we don't have a heart. We have not
Yep.
communicated. It's the Bastiat saying, right? Just because we don't want government to, raise the grain doesn't mean we don't want people to eat.
Right.
And
Yep.
so my goal too with the youth is to explain the logic and the reasoning behind some of the Republican views,
Hmm.
because we do have a heart. And I would actually argue that we have a really big bleeding heart. And that's why we want things arranged a certain way. So, and we'll get into
Yep.
that later as time goes on. But anyway,
Yeah, I
sorry, you sparked a
agree.
lot.
No, no, it's good, but I think, and I'm just gonna say this really quickly, and then we'll move on to the next part, because I think that it kind of dovetails really nicely into
Mhm.
how we got involved. But I think a lot of times we talk about the outcomes, right? And then we
Yeah.
talk about the bricks that we have to lay in order to get the outcome, and we forget to talk about why we want the outcome, right?
Yeah.
Why do we want the border closed, right? Why do we care about illegal immigration at all? Why do we care about the transgender issues? Why do we care about election systems, right? And the reality is when people talk about is democracy dying, right? This is the end of our democracy. It's like, what do you actually mean by that? And when you really boil it down to, we want to have some level of self-direction, and we want to be able to live our lives the way that we want to, and we want everybody else to be able to do that too. And then we
Mhm.
start talking about what that looks like, and the people we know, and how that reflects into our lives. Yeah, the heart shows through. But I think so many times we get caught up in, no, we just need to build a wall and close the border, that
Yeah.
we don't get into, hey, these are all the terrible things that are coming out of it. And we would like to see immigration reform too, because it would help all these people, right? But we get
Yeah.
so stuck on the one thing that we kind of lose the message for the strategy.
Yeah,
So,
well, and I would just like to say this was very controversial, but I think you were in attendance and I was in attendance. But our last Elephant Society, we had Senator Mike Kennedy come
mhm,
and talk about one of the most controversial bills last session, and that session was the transgender bill and the hormone blockers. And I think that that was something that we could be accused of not having a heart about.
right.
If you listened to him, you would have found out that his motivation for that
Mhm,
was having a heart about understanding, children, their
yep.
developing brains, a cultural war that's going on. And so he took arrows for that, arrows that I didn't know he had taken. I don't know
Mhm.
how shocked you were, but
Yeah.
I was surprised. I knew it was controversial. I had no idea. He actually, I don't know if he'll care if I say this, but he sent me a text right before that event, and he said, we were all just going to go have dinner, and we had a
Yep.
private room reserved. And so, also, if you want to check out the Elephant Society, go look at our website.
Mhm.
We would love to have you. But he had sent me a text right before, and he said, "I hope we don't have protesters tonight." And I sent back, like, "You're kidding, right?" And he goes, "No, I'm serious." But then, as he told his story that night, I thought, Oh man, he was serious.
Yeah.
So, and if you listened to his presentation that night, you left there understanding one thing. He did
Yeah.
that because he has a heart.
Yep.
Um, and so I sent him a thank you card where I said, the thanks that you will get, people will never know because uh, you were able to avoid pain that people won't have, and so they won't know to be grateful to you.
Hmm.
And I realize people will argue this on the other side, and there are legitimate concerns there as well. But I think we don't give voice to the reason behind why we do
Yep.
things, and that tends to lend, especially the upcoming generations, to think that we don't have a heart, where the left is always wearing theirs on their sleeve. So
Yep. Well, and that, it the powerful parts of the presentation were actually so I looked into it and I found this out, and this is
mhm,
why I added this to the bill, right? Because I had these concerns. These are the things that I'm worried about for these kids, right? It wasn't just well, I really don't care about these people, so let's mess them over. It I mean, it was all well thought out and well reasoned. And sure, what I find in a lot of cases is the things that people like Mike Kennedy bring up and say, hey, these are the reasons why I'm doing this. Somebody else, I see the same thing with like the Israel Hamas issue, right? Where I
mhm,
listened to one podcast where this guy got interviewed, and he basically said, all the things they're telling you about Hamas and Israel and their conflict are lies. Right. And it's
mhm,
like, okay, well, if you believe that those things are lies, and you believe the things that you're bringing to me are different from the things that I believe, then I can understand where you come to the conclusion that's different from where I do, right? And
right.
so at least there's that level of understanding. And if you look at that and you say, okay, if he's seeing that it affects him in these negative ways, and it really messes kids up in these ways when he does the research, then you can understand he's not passing this bill to be mean. He's passing this bill because he feels like he's protecting people, and the motives matter.
Yeah.
And so anyway, um yeah, I agree with you there. I do want to kind of change gears a little bit and talk about how we got into politics. So, uh, I'm gonna, ladies first. So how did you get
Yeah.
involved
Oh,
in all this stuff?
gosh, I actually have a bunch of stories with how I got involved. I told one of them at the last Central Committee meeting, and I'll just briefly retell that. I had a really influential individual in my life as a teenager, as my best friend's father. At the time, we thought he was a little crazy. He was really into politics, and he was really into gosh, what now we'd probably call conspiracy theories, but a lot of them have panned out to be conspiracy truths.
Uh-huh.
And so he would always give us information, and we would roll our eyes and run out the door as teenagers do. And one time he had stopped me and said, hey, he called me by my maiden name. And so he'd say, hey, Bulkley, come here. Why do you think I care about all this political stuff? And I said, I don't know. It's your hobby. Um, and he said, no, because when systems fail, innocent people get hurt. And I was like, oh, I had no idea, and that always stuck with me. And so as I got older, I also love systems. Anytime that I see a problem, I try and find, okay, well, where's the bottleneck? Where's the root?
Uh-huh.
How do we, and so, which is why I love caucus, because
Yep.
it's a great system. So I had that. I also, near and dear, had a fantastic AP government teacher in high school. And so he was so into his job. We did a lesson on the Federal Reserve once, and he pulled $5 out of his pocket, ripped it up, and threw it in the garbage just to prove that it was a promissory note and that it was supposed to represent, gold. And there
Hmm.
were kids screaming and digging through the garbage to tape it back together so they could buy some lunch.
Who was
Um,
this?
so this is Gary. This was Mr. Miner at Orem High.
Okay. Yep.
Fantastic. I took his class twice, even when I didn't have to, just because I learned so much from him. So he was really pivotal for me. I took a little bit of probably like 10 years off. Let's see, how old is in 2008, I believe, I ran against Enid Green for National Committee Woman at the state convention.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I had gotten into I had gotten into politics a little bit. She was unopposed. I had some strong opinions on the national level. And so, just like we were talking about people filing, maybe because they feel like they should, I was probably that person at that time. And so I took $20 and printed off flyers and handed them out at the door. And that was kind of the extent of my entire campaign. So I gave a speech at the time that was probably entitled "Rome is Burning," which little did I know,
Uh-huh.
we were nowhere near that as to where we are right now.
Right.
Um, so I took about 10 years off. We moved to Idaho. I ran just a community group, a book group. We took the founding documents and we went through the founding documents. I realized I knew the answers to questions on the test, but I hadn't read the documents. And so if somebody were to say, three branches of government, I would have said Montesquieu. If somebody
Uh-huh.
would have said, the pamphlet that changed the hearts and minds during the Revolutionary War, I would have said common sense. But at the
Right.
time, I realized I hadn't read them. And so I got a group of community together, and we just started one at a time going down the list. And wow, I mean, if you want to go on a journey, read political philosophy from the Enlightenment period, and you will see the foundation of everything that we have in our system. So I was on city council there, and then I moved back, and I'm a teacher, so I taught for a while. And I kept having this feeling like, hey, that knowledge that I had gained from reading political philosophy, that I would use it at some point. And then I was able to get what I had considered my dream job, working for Libertas, which takes up what I believe to be worthy causes. They're libertarian leaning, but they usually will battle for the little guy. And so I worked for them for a little while, and then as we know it, the world came crashing down, and I kind of switched gears, and we've been going ever since. So I ran for chair in April of last year, and my kids will tell you, I delegates are near and dear to my heart, and
Yep.
every event that has them, I don't know. I mean, I adore them. I am desperately trying to build a system that allows both a process in which to share knowledge, for them to share with us, and us with them, and same with elected officials, and then also to provide a system that gives them a voice. And so that's where I'm at right now. That's probably my whole political history. So what about you?
So I have to say, I didn't have any of the strong political influence growing up, right?
Mm,
I mean, I know my parents were involved. They generally voted for Republicans. Um, you'd hear about different politicians, but I wasn't really that involved. Um, I started podcasting in 2008.
mm,
I got involved in some of the other stuff there, but for the most part, I was just involved in the community. And a couple of things happened kind of in succession that got me into politics. The first thing was in 2016, I decided that I probably ought to go to that caucus thing, whatever it was, and uh, just see what it's about and get involved. And so I went, and we basically filled up the entire bleachers down one side of the gym over at West, what is it, Willow Creek, element or junior high. And there are a ton of people there, and it's the presidential preference poll, which we're doing this year again, by the way. But so I was there, and I was talking to people and kind of getting a feel for, and there were people that were like Trump, 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 and there were people there that were Cruz, 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 right? And and I'd started listening to like Glenn Beck and Ben Shapiro and a few other people, and so I thought I knew what I was doing, and I thought I knew what I was talking about. And hadn't fully formed my opinions on things, which if you're going to start somewhere, right, go ahead and start listening to some of these folks, but ask questions, right? Ask the hard questions. How do they know
yes.
this? Where do they pick this up, right? So because I got challenged on some stuff while I was there, and I had to go and figure it out, right? It's like this guy's going off on why Trump is the best guy ever, and I'm kind of leaning toward Ted Cruz, and so is what he's saying true about Donald Trump, or is it all made up? Anyway, so we get in there, and we start voting for delegates and stuff, and I didn't feel like I had some imposter syndrome, right? Because it was my first caucus meeting, and I was thinking, we'll just see what happens, right? And then maybe next time I'll run for one of these spots. So they get down to the precinct chair race, and one guy got up, and he's currently on the city council in Lehigh. You probably know him.
Mhm.
But he gets up and he says, well, I'll run for, because the people who had been doing it for years were not going to do it again. And so he gets
Right.
up and he said, I'll do it, but I can't make it to the state convention. And so everybody's looking at each other and going, well, that, we need
Kind of a big
somebody.
deal. Yeah.
Right. We want somebody who can go to the convention. And I kind of muttered under my breath, well, I could do that. And so my neighbor sitting behind me nominated me to be the precinct chair. And,
Nice.
of course they go, are you willing? And I was like, I have no idea what to do, but sure. And
Yeah.
so I was elected precinct chair because I could go to the state convention and he couldn't. And, so we get out there and I start going to the meetups, or because just to give a little bit of background. So one of the things that we're doing is not just caucus night, but if you're elected a delegate or precinct chair or precinct vice chair, you're automatically a delegate. You go to these meet and greets and you get to go talk to the candidates, and you get to figure out, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And so I'm like copying questions that I'm hearing other delegates ask, right? But then
Yeah.
sometimes they talk about things and I'm like, and this is something that you brought up, that doesn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but
Mhm.
there's something wrong there, right? And so then I'd go discuss it with some of the other delegates, and they'd be like, well, what you're picking up on is that it's flirting with the line of violating this right that you
Mhm.
have.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling, right? So I realized that I was picking up way more from talking to other delegates than I was from listening to Glenn Beck and Ben Shapiro and whoever else I was listening to at the time. The other thing was I also realized that these guys had to talk to me because they wanted my vote at the convention. And
Yep.
so I could ask them my questions, and I could ask my fundamental questions. I could say, hey, look, I'm new at this. Why do you think the thing you think? Right? Explain it to me so that I can say, yes, you're right on this. Right? Instead of just going and saying, how do you feel? Because people were asking about like building a bridge across Utah Lake. So what do you think about that? Right? And so it wasn't just, okay, well, tell me why it's a good idea. Tell me why it's a bad idea. And then I'd have a delegate take me aside and say, that was a good question. What he didn't say was this. Right.
Yep.
And so I got that. I got to fill in the gaps. And that got me really, really interested in, okay, I can make an impact here, right? Because I can find out the facts, I can ask my questions, and then I can take this to my fellow delegates, and we can push on these guys and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe you should pump the brakes here because there's stuff here we don't understand. Or, hey, let's go do this because it's the right thing to do. And, again, I mean, Corey Malloy lives, a few minutes away from my house. And so I could go find him. Jake Anderegg actually lives in my neighborhood, and he actually took me to lunch, and I asked him a bunch of questions. He wasn't even running at the time, but you get the idea. Maybe he was running at the time. Anyway, I think he was running on a post, so it didn't matter as much. But anyway,
Right.
so yeah, it's just so that's where I got involved, and I was like, we need to facilitate this as much as possible,
Yeah.
because if we can get qualified people who understand these issues to go in and ask these good questions, right, and the other delegates can hear them answer them, then that's the way to go, because then we can go in and we can make an informed decision as to who our nominee is.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's a two-way street too, because it
yeah,
also educates our elected officials. So
yeah,
when you have somebody who can come in and speak intelligently about a subject and go to that second and third layer instead of just sound bites or,
right,
platform platitudes, it's a two-way street in
yep,
the everybody leaves you know, more informed and better because either their idea was challenged and they realized the error of their ways and where they were wrong, or they're reinforced in knowing that they were right in their position.
hmm,
And so I
yep,
love those meet and greets for that exact
yeah.
reason. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the convention was more of the same. Now there was a whole bunch of other drama going on, and I'm not going to get into that, but especially at the state convention. But the thing that was also interesting, so I get involved, and then I was elected the House District Vice Chair, right? And so I
Mhm.
worked with Max Sims and then Anna Standage. to make things work, and got a real good feel for how the caucus system works from the other side and what it takes to put that stuff together and, be involved. And then in 2019, so 20, yeah, it was 2019. So let me back up. So 2016, I wound up going to New York City for a business trip. I was invited to come and do podcast interviews at a conference by Microsoft. And while I was there, I thought it would be funny to buy a Make America Great Again hat and go stand in front of Trump Tower and take my picture. And I didn't understand how people felt about Donald Trump. And it didn't get better the longer he was president. Let me just put it that way. So, and the reason I'm talking about this is because it kind of cemented in my head, hey, look, I've got to stand up for what's right no matter what. So one of my co-hosts on one of my podcasts came under fire for saying some stuff that the social justice warriors didn't like, and she didn't mean it the way they took it. And so I stepped in and did a YouTube video. It's still up. I didn't take any of this stuff down. And I said, hey, look, that's not how she meant it. Y'all should just back off. If you want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation. And then I actually invited them on the podcasts and said, look, we'll just record it. I won't have it edited at all. And people can just, hear your side of the thing. And that's when I figured out that some people don't want to have the conversation. And they're, in fact, more interested in the power they can wield by taking people down who have any standing in the communities they work in. But I also figured out, because they found that picture, on Twitter of me with the Trump hat on, and they went after me for it. And I realized that, you know what, I really had to figure out, am I going to apologize for this? Am I going to cave to it? And I realized that, you know what, I'm just going to say what I think and just be direct on this stuff. And that was the other piece that kind of firmed me up on a lot of this stuff. Was I realized that it was okay for me to have an opinion. It was okay for me to change my opinion if I got better information, but also no matter what, I needed to be able to do the right thing and push forward the right thing. And so, I don't apologize for my opinions, and I had to learn the hard way not to do that. But where that wound up leading me was, I also realized that there is power in the way that you approach a lot of these issues, and that some no-name guy from Lehi, Utah. I grew up in Orem. I went to Orem High too, but
Go Tigers.
no Tigers, right? But some no-name guy from Lehi can get, so I ran for school board and, had a lot of those same arguments. Is this happening in the schools? Is it not happening in the schools? Right. There was a video that came out from a teacher at Lehi High School that was saying all kinds of inappropriate things in front of kids. And I'm sure that's still out there too, if you want to go find it. But it was those kinds of things I realized that, I interviewed Burgess Owens and a bunch of other people during COVID for a podcast, just trying to help people, hear from the candidates that they couldn't go to meet and greets to hear from. But I also realized that, the only other time I saw Burgess was when he was running for re-election. And, so back to that national versus state, I realized that the local issues were the ones that were really impacting me and really impacting my kids. And so I got back in and started looking at things and decided, you know what, we need to be getting this message out, and we need to be getting people involved in the party and help them realize that, hey, look, we care about the federal issues, but we want to make an impact on the local issues. And so I was actually eyeing running for chair of the party. And I saw that we had a couple of solid people, Cristy and Ben, who were running. And I also realized that I would be happy to work with them. I didn't see any candidates running for vice chair yet. And so I signed up to run for vice chair. And that's how I wound up where I'm at. And so at the end of the day, it just worked out that, hey, Cristy and I jive on a lot of ideas, a lot of ways of doing things. We have complementary skill sets in a lot of ways. And so we can bring it all together and we can help everybody else figure out, okay, look, this is who we really are. And yeah, if the federal issues drive you crazy, then let's work local. And if you have one or two pet issues, then show up for those, right? Go testify in front of the committee, go fight the good fight. And on the issues you don't care about, then yeah, maybe you take the day off. But however you want to be involved, I want people to be able to be involved. And I also just want people to know, hey, look, no, this is who the Republicans really are, right? When we're out there doing our thing, this is why we're out there doing our thing. And, some of these truths are hard truths. Some of them are hard for people to accept. But at the end of the day, I feel like the truth will win. And so that's what we're here for. That's what we're, and sometimes it's going to be hard and discouraging because it doesn't always go our way. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's my story.
It's a great story. I remember standing in, I can't remember what elementary, but you were running for school board,
Mm-hmm.
and you caught me on the way out the door in the parking lot, and we had some conversations, and I put your name in my phone, and I was like, hey, that guy, he kind of gets it, so
Mm-hmm.
ironic that I realized later on that put the two and two together that you were that same person.
Right.
um and no, I just a side note, I've so appreciated you because you are an idea person and you'll push back. And I love that so much. And so I do hope that, with this podcast, we can present that, because we're not
Yeah.
talking about coming out with the end all be all truth when we have these discussions. And that's kind of what I hate about politics.
Right.
And I love that you mentioned that you had started listening to maybe people that you don't agree with everything that they say now,
Mm-hmm.
but at the time, that's where you started. And
Yep.
so we all start at some point, and this is my nod toward the First Amendment and freedom of speech, is that unless you know somebody who wakes up every morning and just speaks the ultimate truth coming out of their mouth, right, then the rest of us just can't talk. Um,
Yep.
and you have to attach yourself to an untruth to anchor yourself to something to be able to find a better truth, the
Mm-hmm.
next thing. And so I get so annoyed when people get canceled or criticized for having been wrong in the past.
Yep.
Because if that's true for all of us, then there's no hope for any of us, right?
Yep.
And that's also what I love about that system and the process that you talked about with the meet and greets and caucus is I
Yep.
learn so much every time. I mean, man, it's a whirlwind, and anybody who wants to run, please know that it is a whirlwind, and you will be dedicating a couple of weeks almost every single night
Yep.
to vetting these candidates. But
Boy, I can
there is
attest to that. On
if
both
if
ends.
you yeah, I had people pull me aside after and be like, I had no idea. But at the end of it, what you glean from those ashes of chaos is I
Mhm.
am always smarter. I always know more after having those conversations with
Yep.
people. And I feel I'm always reassured that this is the best system possible. People who care about the stuff that affects us the most, closest to us. And it's such a great system. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, just a couple of random thoughts off of what you talked about. But I'm grateful. You would make a great chair as well. So I am grateful that you're my vice chair. When Senate District 22 came up, I was kind of sweating it. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Yeah, and just for context on a couple of things there. So, Cristy mentioned getting canceled. They did basically sink my business for me for,
Yeah.
supporting Trump. Even though, honestly, I took the picture as a gag. I'm not one of those. I was right about Trump from the beginning. I kind of came around on a lot of those things. When he did the right thing, and it drove me nuts when he didn't. But the other thing is that when she mentioned Senate District 22, I did run for the Utah Senate when Jake Anderegg resigned, and so there's what 3-4 weeks where I wasn't doing vice chair stuff. I was doing running for Senate stuff. But yeah,
Yeah. It was rough for
but,
me when it ended. I was like
yeah.
grateful, grateful to have you back.
Yeah, I didn't
Grateful
get
for all you do.
elected. If you're wondering, that's why I'm here. But the reality is that yeah, you learn so much. I mean, people ask me questions that I had no idea what the answers were, but it forced me to go and learn, right? And that's the real power. And
Yeah.
and the other thing I want to throw up there is that yeah, it helped some of the candidates to have relationships, within the system or within the party, but especially in some of these more local races. Um, People really made a difference just by being themselves and talking about the issues and putting forward where they're at. Yeah, people like folks that have a bit of experience, a bit of exposure to the system, but sometimes what we see is that you get one or two candidates running and neither of them are what people want. And so they'll go for the other guy that shows up and says, hey, I want to make a difference here. And it's okay. Well, we're not thrilled with the incumbent. We're not thrilled with the other guy. And so, you get a real shot. And the other thing is even if you don't get elected, I found that a lot of things that I talk to people out, I could hear them taking those things over to the other candidates and
Mhm.
asking them about them. And so,
Yeah.
you can run and you can make a difference, even if you're not super involved in the party or super involved in politics.
Yeah, and I don't want that to be an obstacle ever, is
Yeah,
not understanding the
I
system because it
agree.
is such a learning curve. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why a lot of times at Central Committee meeting, we will talk about just understanding what's going on, and also why we put the organizational chart on our website,
Mhm.
just so that people can see the structure of the party. But I care more about somebody that has integrity, understands political
Mhm.
philosophy, understands the things that affect the most people and their freedom, then I care if somebody,
Right,
understands how the system works. And for sure, it's a learning curve. But our hope is that maybe we can be there for you for the learning curve
right.
with the things that don't matter as much. Um, yeah,
Yeah, the
because
way
we,
that
we need we need good people in office.
yeah, the way that I see a lot of it is if you have the same fundamental foundational beliefs that I do and you're willing to listen,
Hmm.
then I can bring
Hmm.
you around on the issues that you don't understand well, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is that yeah, if understanding the system or knowing specific people is your problem getting into running for office, I mean, we can totally help with that. Now, we stay neutral as far as like one candidate over the other, but if you need help
Mhm.
figuring out just how to do something, we do that for anybody. And so we'll do it for you too.
Sure. And subjects, by all means,
Yep.
let's debate subjects. Let's
Oh
talk
yeah.
about the stuff that affects us. I always say,
Yep.
like, your freedom and your money. Let's talk about it,
Yep.
because and this is how I explain it to teenagers. But life is made up of time. If you exchange your time for money in the form of a job, and then
Mhm.
government takes your money, they are essentially taking what makes up your life.
Yep, they're
And
stealing your
so,
life.
they're still in your life. And so those are things that should absolutely always be on the table for discussion, and like rigorous discussion.
Mhm.
So
Yep,
so we
absolutely.
I won't shy away from controversial stuff, and I know you don't either.
Nope.
And spirited debate, I say welcome.
Yep. Well, and I think at the end of the day, we can recognize that hey, we may have some differences in the fundamentals that bring us to a different place, in our political stances. But I can still see you as a human being who's doing your best at being a good human being, and I think that's where most people
Right.
are. So,
Yeah, and my gosh, if you've never changed your mind about something, I mean, come on.
you should try it.
You haven't had enough, yeah, controversial discussions with your close friends.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well,
absolutely.
I think we're kind of toward the end of our time. I just want to remind everybody, come out to the events. We're putting on more events. Elephant Society is a great place to get started because so far it's been a group of 20-ish, maybe 30 people. And
Yeah.
so you can come and you can meet all of the folks that are involved in the party and get to know us a little bit better and have these kinds of conversations. Um, and so if you go to ucrp.org and then just click on, there should be a button there for Elephant Society. You can find out we're getting our next few meetings scheduled. We usually just go to lunch or dinner, maybe have a speaker or a topic or just getting to know each other and, see where things go. And then by all means, come out to caucus night and talk to your neighbors about going to caucus night and just kind of explain to them, look, at the end of the day, somebody's going to pick the nominee and it may as well be people from our neighborhood who are involved in that. So,
Yep. Yeah. Also, with Elephant Society, our goal is to bring subjects that are interesting,
mhm.
relevant, and then also same thing with Central Committee meeting is to rotate geographically so that we do north, central, south, and then like you said, we've got lunch and dinner. Obviously, we're trying
Yep.
to accommodate people in their work schedule, and so our hope, we're trying to get a list out so that people can plan the ones that they want to come to. Elephant Society is $20 a month, is a reoccurring donation to the party. Will get you and a plus one invited to
Yep.
either the lunch or dinner. Now we have you pay for your own meal, but we provide the entertainment per se. The
Yep.
discussion. We try and get guests who can come and talk about stuff that is of interest. And so I think we've been pretty successful so far, and we've got a couple of good ideas coming down the path there. And if some of you guys have certain people that you want to hear from, let us know. And if that's the draw to get you in, if we fund ourselves, and the more that we can get people donating to a cause that they like, and Elephant Society
Hmm.
is a good way to do that. Um, yeah, the better. And no one ever asked me. I've been a delegate for a long time, and no one ever asked me to be in it. So I guess I'm asking people who are involved in the party to join the Elephant Society.
Yep.
Support a cause that is near and dear to your heart and probably affects you the very most, both in your freedom and your pocketbook. And so that's a great way to be involved. And Mark Clough helps run the Elephant Society, and he does a great job. So he's on our steering committee.
Yep.
So good
Absolutely.
times.
Yeah, one other thing I just want to put out there, we don't have any of them scheduled right now, as far as I know, but last week we did have the event with Ken Ivory that was just in the auditorium at
Hmm.
Mountain View High School, and he just talked to us
Yeah.
about federalism and some of the ideas around that, and we're looking to do more things like that. So if you have a topic that you want to hear Cristy and I talk about, or have somebody show up on the podcast to talk about, or do an event on, or have come speak at the Elephant Society, let us know, because we want to provide you with the information you need to be involved and informed.
Yeah, a couple of ideas that we've been talking about with those get-togethers is how critical race theory has been used, or
Mhm.
critical theory has been used in the past, to lead to revolutions. And so Mao used
Yep.
it, prior to that revolution, and so it was used also prior to the Russian
Hmm.
Revolution as well. And so we have people who understand critical theory, and then we also had some people who we've been connected with, that have survived communism, and
Right.
just their story with that, and letting these youth understand that utopian ideals, that sound really good on paper, maybe in practice don't work out. And so if we can share that with them. Also, I've had the opportunity. We've talked about this a little bit. We had some gentlemen come and talk about addiction, and how uh, our homelessness problem is rooted in an addiction problem. And so we've talked about possibly talking about policy and having them come and talk also about that. I don't know a family that's untouched by addiction one way or another.
Yep.
And so these are things that do affect us, and policy does matter. And I think that's also a subject where we can show as Republicans that we do have a heart, but how you do things absolutely matters.
Yep.
Just handing everybody a home isn't going to solve an addiction problem. So.
Right. Yeah, I just want to add one other thing, and that was that I took my four oldest kids to the last event, and they were like,
Mm.
"Dad, we talked about this in school, and the difference between the federal and the state, and the separation of powers." And we left, and I was like, "So did you learn something?" And they were all like, "That was awesome. I didn't even know
Oh.
that stuff." And so that's the other thing, is if we can bring our kids and not shy away from talking about these ideas, right? Give them the opportunity. If you're not well versed in it, right? Because a lot of the stuff that Ken talked about, I wasn't well versed in. Like, I knew some of it, but not to that level, right? But if we can help them understand these ideas and recognize the principles behind them, right? Hey, we care about people, and therefore, we care
Hmm.
about people being able to choose and be autonomous human beings, and so therefore, right? That's where that difference comes in, because it's like, hey, this is why this matters, is because then we can take care of people in our state our way, because we have federalism, right? And yeah, it really made a difference for them. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, like, lastly, just want to say, I think the reason that the majority of us are involved, I mean, we told our story on a personal level, but it sounds trite, but I believe it's true for all of us, is we have kids,
yep.
and some of us have grandkids. And so as I look at this, and people tend to think, oh, well, Republicans are conservative in the sense that they look towards the past. And my goal is that we look towards the past for principles that work, but we
Hmm.
look towards the future for our children, you know.
Yep.
And we look at like the more that we can be involved in having these discussions about moving forward, especially with these, I mean, we have new subjects, we
Yeah.
have technology to deal with. I just went to a meeting where we talked about data privacy and what does that mean with
Yeah.
technology, and these are all like super relevant. And if we can have people who understand the principles of these things, and so we take what was good from the past and we apply it to the future so that
Right.
we can understand and learn from the lessons. Like I don't want to repeat, bad things in history. And if we can engage and get the best people from our party having those conversations, then we will have done our job. So that's
Yep.
what I'm after. And Utah County, I think, is the best place to do it for sure.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up. Just one more call out, ucrp.org. It's all there. And yeah, we'll talk next week, Cristy.
All right. Thanks, Chuck.